Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 23rd, 2015. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Don is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And before we get into the news here, I'm looking at the corporate media feed, and they're all throwing confetti and wearing their party hats. The NASDAQ has closed at a record high. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And I don't know about you, but when they start reporting the economy like it's a sports score, I think that's a sign we're in serious, serious trouble out there. Now, the administration is having to wipe a little bit of egg off of its face this morning. They're having to acknowledge that a drone strike last January killed 2 hostages being held by the supposed terrorists, one of them an American, the other one an Italian. And what's interesting is looking at the quote saying this is the first known instance in which the U.S. has accidentally killed a hostage in a drone strike. And I would say the emphasis on known. When they say it's the first known instance, they're sort of acknowledging there may be some others that are still classified top secret, because this isn't exactly something that looks good on an ex-president's resume here. Now, one of the articles reporting on this drone faux pas last January also included the comment that American al-Qaeda Adam Gadon was killed in a separate operation. At least we got Adam Gadon, and he is out of the way. I wouldn't be too sure, because like Baghdadi, they keep reporting he's dead, and then he rises from the grave and goes in search of brain or something. And the corporate media and the government reported Adam Gadon had been killed back in 2008. So they keep recycling the villains. They don't have enough out there. Where we got him this time. Oh, I guess we missed. Oh, we'll get him again. And they sort of hope that we're not remembering that the government has already claimed to have killed these people over and over and over again. But at this point, the United States government is acknowledging that they have killed 8 Americans in drone strikes into countries with which we are not exactly at war. Actually, it's not even exactly. We're not at war with these people. Now, speaking of war, even though Saudi Arabia made an announcement that their air campaign in Yemen is officially over, the bombs continue to fall, and the Saudis are bombing Taiz, and let's see, where else are they going to? Well, basically, they make a point here that they're bombing army brigades loyal to former President, former President Saleh, and they were responding to where the people of Yemen captured an army brigade that's loyal to the current U.S. puppet Hadi. There's also more fighting in the city of Aden. Now, as you know, not too long ago, the U.S. government basically abandoned American nationals in Yemen. Said, you should get out of there, but we're not coming for you. Do what you can. I think the reason is the U.S. government is hoping that Americans will be taken prisoner and killed in a very bloody fashion to wag at the American people to build support for an outright ground invasion of Yemen, to teach those Yemeni people that once you have a U.S. puppet ruler, you learn to love and obey them, or bad things will happen to you. Well, U.S. citizens, American nationals, are being flown out of Yemen aboard the planes sent by Russia. Russia's just landing, opening the door, and saying, if you're a foreign national, come on board. We don't care where you come from. And so these U.S. citizens are getting a trip from Yemen up to Moscow. And interestingly enough, they are being interviewed by the Russian media and screaming about how the American government has basically abandoned them. And yes, that's exactly what happened. Supposedly the United States, with all these military assets and air transports and the rest of it, couldn't be bothered to pull their nationals out of Yemen. And the only explanation that makes sense is they were hoping the Yemenites would kill some of those Americans and put it up on social media so the U.S. government could say, oh, well, now we have to invade and send in the ground troops to Yemen. That's the only reason for the U.S. government to abandon those people there. Now, as the situation in Yemen continues to deteriorate, the U.S. is once again warning of a new Russian buildup in Ukraine. They're bringing the trucks and the tanks and all of this stuff closer to the border with Ukraine. They're getting ready to invade. Now, of course, the U.S. has repeatedly been making this claim over the last 14 months. And every single previous claim turned out to be a hoax. Photos of the wrong equipment, mislabeled, deliberately blurred, in an ongoing effort to somehow portray Russia as the bad guy in Ukraine, that this is all somehow Russia's fault, and to obfuscate the fact that this civil war began with the U.S.-backed overthrow of Ukraine's elected government last year and the installation of yet another U.S. puppet junta. Now, Russia has delivered another cargo of humanitarian aid to Donetsk and Luhansk. It's all subject to international inspections. It's food, medicine, other such supplies. And the U.S. is out there saying, we're absolutely convinced that somewhere in there they're hiding weapons and bullets and whatnot. Same thing that they're now saying about that Iranian convoy, which we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes here. Meanwhile, a Polish member of parliament is out there basically admitting the snipers who were shooting people during the Maidan riots in Ukraine were a special ops unit trained in Poland and loaned to the United States as a favor to kick up a ruckus, to blame on the government of Kiev to drive them from power. This is a stunt the U.S. has played more than 50 times since the end of World War II. Go into a country, kick up unrest, stage some false flag terror or other incidents, drive the legitimate elected government from power, and install a U.S. puppet ruler. They've attempted it in over 50 different countries. They've succeeded about half the time. Well-known cases are Iran in 1953, when the CIA ousted Mohammad Mossadegh and installed the dictator, the Shah. Chile in 1973, when they ejected the elected government of Salvador Allende and installed the dictator Pinochet. Batista in Cuba, Marcos in the Philippines, on and on and on and on. And all these countries laboring under these U.S. puppet rulers, they don't want to be under U.S. puppet rulers anymore. That's the whole core of the so-called Arab Spring, for the Arab nations to have governments that work for their nation and their people and do not serve a foreign power. We don't like it here in the U.S. when we see our Congress openly supporting Tel Aviv as higher priority than anything here in America. So why should these Arab nations love their U.S. puppet rulers? We don't like our Israeli puppet rulers. It's a very, very simple mechanism here. Now, over at MIT, Professor Theodore Postel, who's a professor of science, technology, and international security, has come out basically saying we are at the greatest chance of an accidental nuclear war now than during the Cold War because of all the weapons are getting shuffled around. We know that there have been some serious mistakes, near mistakes. If you've ever seen the Matthew Broderick film War Games, that's actually based on a true story. Somebody accidentally fed a training simulation into the main computers at Cheyenne Mountain, almost triggered an attack against Russia. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, a nuclear-armed strike force in Japan received an order to attack Russia. Fortunately, common sense broke out. The commander of that unit said, I want a confirmation. And it came back, sorry, we sent that by mistake. But it's been very, very close. We've had a lot of these so-called broken arrow incidents where nuclear weapons get lost, misplaced. They're very reckless with these very, very dangerous machines here. So far, the body count for all these U.S. wars against the Middle East is over 4 million Muslims since 1990. We're getting into world war body counts right now. We got to take a break for commercials. I know we've got 2 callers waiting on the line. We're going to get to you as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the 2 callers who were waiting hung up. You know, no patience whatsoever. I mean, the people who call Rush Limbaugh, they'll wait for an hour to get on the air. So have a little patience, people. We do have to run commercials and pay some bills, and we do actually have to report on some real news from time to time. Now, getting back onto Russia and Ukraine, as you know, the international investigation into the crash of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 has basically been taking the position that somehow this was all Russia's fault, And they didn't do much of an on-scene investigation under the excuse that it was a very dangerous war zone. Well, now Malaysia and the Donetsk People's Republic have started their own investigation. They have gone to the actual crash site. They have recovered 15 tons of debris to start reconstructing what happened, and more to the point, look for the marks of exactly what kind of weapon brought that aircraft down. I have a sneaking hunch they are not going to be in agreement with the foregone conclusions of the so-called international investigation. Now, we have been hearing over the last several days, since the beginning of the week, about how Iran had sent a convoy of warships to Yemen. They're carrying weapons. They're out there. They're forcing a confrontation. They're making war. And the U.S. dispatched more warships to the region, including the aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which lost to a French submarine in the war games they had down in the South Atlantic. But I guess they figure it's certainly up to anything Iran might have. And finally, we actually saw in the corporate media at long last photos of the so-called Iranian warships, and as we surmised, they are container cargo vessels. And so now the U.S. is backing off about, we have to go after the Iranian warships and saying, well, we've got all of our warships near Yemen in order to create options. We have to have options for dealing with Iranian vessels, which are now turning out to be cargo ships, container cargo ships. And they're not following a circuitous route. They just set out, said, we're heading for Yemen, and that's it. And we're still hearing on the U.S. corporate media about how U.S. officials believe those containers contain weapons. I think it's humanitarian aid. Because the people of Yemen right now are starving. They're going hungry. They're without water because of this U.S.-sponsored attack using Saudi Arabia as the proxy. And it's going to put the U.S. in a very awkward situation. I have no doubt that when challenged, the Iranian ships will say, come on board and take a look. Open any container you want. And they're going to find that there are no weapons there. And that's going to put the U.S. in a very awkward position, because if they turn the convoy around and send it back to Iran, guess who looks like the bully in the public opinion of the world? So the U.S. is trying to save face out there by saying, well, we're keeping our options open here, and they could be doing this, and they could have a Death Star in kit form down there in the bottom of that ship. But we put up a picture of one of these cargo ships there. There's no way anybody looks at that is going to say that's an Iranian warship, and yet that is the lie. The corporate media has been feeding us all week that it was a convoy of Iranian warships. No, they are not. Anyway, Russia is supporting Argentina's desire to peacefully settle the dispute with Great Britain over the Falkland Islands. So once again, we're seeing Putin going on out there as the global statesman and peacemaker, trying to tamp down these conflicts. He did it in Syria. He's trying to do it in Ukraine, trying to do it in the Falkland Islands. He's going to be remembered in history as a peacemaker, standing in contrast with the warmongers like Benjamin Netanyahu, President Obama, John McCain even more so. Now, there's an article over at Desert Peace, a resolution Germany owes history. And it's coming down to this attempt by the United Nations Security Council to restart the peace process leading to an eventual two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. And basically saying that Germany has had a long-standing position supporting the two states. And if the Bundestag changes its mind, it's going to call Germany's integrity into question. Now, interestingly enough, remember yesterday we were talking about the Security Council is going to, they're looking at a resolution authored by New Zealand to basically order Israel and Palestine back to the negotiating tables to push for the two-state solution. And here we are less than 24 hours later, and a rocket has been fired from Gaza into Israel. And as usual, it hit dirt. No injuries, no damage. What's the point of launching that rocket? Well, obviously, so Netanyahu can now go to the Security Council and say, how can you talk about forcing us to go to peace with these people? They're attacking us again. They shot a bottle rocket over the fence there. Israel has done this so many times, they can't possibly believe anybody's going to fall for it any longer. Every time there is talk about somehow bringing peace and an end to this occupation and recognizing a state of Palestine, some Israeli lackey fires a bottle rocket over the fence, and they make a big deal about this, 6-inch crater in the dust somewhere. That Israel is under threat from Gaza. Oh, my goodness. And for all we know, Israel is going to launch a major war against Gaza and the West Bank and try and solve the problem that way. Because that's what always follows these false flags. And Israel may be pushing the panic button because the White House has already indicated Israel should not count on a U.S. veto at the Security Council any longer, at least while Obama is in office, because of that grandstanding stunt Netanyahu pulled before the U.S. Congress. Now, getting on to the economy, we have heard an announcement from the European Central Bank and Greece that there's going to be some kind of a press conference. It may already be underway, but we haven't heard what's being discussed. But they've got some kind of a big announcement. I would say, given that they're teasing the press conference, it's going to be an announcement of some kind of a deal to keep Greece enslaved to the European Central Bank in a way that doesn't trigger a reaction by the other member states of the European Union to demand some kind of reduction or easing on their debt. So we'll see what's going to happen on that. But there's apparently some movement in that situation there to keep Greece in the European Union and not risk having it pivot towards Russia, because Russia's been courting them. They rolled out that red carpet. Now, for those of you who remember the LIBOR scandal, the investigation is over, and as usual, when you have an investigation into criminal bankers, nobody goes to jail. Okay, Deutsche Bank paid a fine amounting to about $25,000 for each of their employees to keep their executives out of jail. So if you're working for Deutsche Bank, I wouldn't be counting on a Christmas bonus this year. We'll be right back with a phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at an article which was just sent to me by one of our listeners in Russia. And basically, the Kiev government is now putting out the story that all those people who died in the House of Trade Unions, well, they just set fire to themselves. Really? We didn't do anything wrong. It was just a mass suicide by burning. Well, I'm sorry, Poroshenko. We didn't buy that nonsense at Waco, and we are not buying it now. Is there nobody in the propaganda corps that can come up with an original idea? I think they write this stuff with a dartboard. How do we explain away these deaths? Okay, they burned themselves to death. We're going to take a phone call here. Jim in St. Louis. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jim, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. There you are. What's on your mind today?
Hey, I wanted to know if you've got any information or you can shed any light on what's going on with the Jade Helm operation coming up June the 15th through, I believe, September the 15th.
Okay, could you turn down your speaker so that we're not listening to my own voice here? Because the reason I allow phone calls on the show is so people don't have to listen just to me. All right. Jade Helm is, of course, being promoted as an exercise of military control over the U.S. streets and cities. It is alarming to a lot of people because it's very clearly a violation of posse comitatus. At the moment, I think it is just an exercise, and it's a psyop. It's a show of force to remind the American people that the U.S. government will do bad things to them if they dare stand up, refuse to believe what they're told to do, refuse to do as they're told, refuse to fling their babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets. And the reason I think it is just a drill is because it only involves 9 states. Colorado's already backed out, and the federal government isn't pushing the issue. And the total manpower deployment is only 1,200. So with 9 states and 1,200 people, that's not really reconquering the entire United States of America, because the rest of the states, if they do something nefarious in those 9 states, the rest of the country is going to start building very thick walls at their borders. Now, that having been said, We know that there is a long history of drills that suddenly go live when there's a corresponding false flag event. We know that there was a FEMA drill in New York just the day before 9/11 happened. There was a bombing drill going on in London during the tube bombing. There was another bombing drill involving backpack bombs in Boston when that bombing took place. Right. So we obviously do need to be very concerned that there might be some kind of a false flag blamed on American patriots who are now seen as the enemy by the U.S. government. And so we
that concern also is because our militia, you know, our people are putting the guns together and such are kind of going to go and quote, practice also. And, you know, if there's one bad shot, one bad temper comes out of this thing, you know, something's going to break loose.
Well, then do me a favor. Do me a favor. Yes, you know, have your practicing as far away from the Jade Helm people as you can and avoid a confrontation. And one more time, do not initiate violence against the federal government. That is what they want. But prudence demands that we all be prepared to protect ourselves when the government initiates violence against us.
Right, yeah. I wasn't speaking from myself, just what I'm hearing in the news a little bit, you know, on the Internet. We're not getting anything on the public television, you know, or the airwaves there. It's, you know, just really covered up.
Well, I would be very concerned, and apparently there's this ex-Navy SEAL, and we're going to be talking about him in a little bit as well, who's come out that some of these militia patriot groups are actually created and run by the U.S. government intelligence agencies in order to manufacture a pageant of an armed uprising that can be used as an excuse to declare national emergency, martial law, drop the Bill of Rights into the shredder, and so forth and so on. And we know this government likes to do that kind of stuff. We know that a lot of the people being wagged at us as evil villains are manufactured by the FBI, going on back to the Oklahoma City bombing. The religious commune, Elohim City, that was supposed to be the headquarters for Tim McVeigh as he planned his dastardly attack on the Murrah Federal Building, was being run by an FBI informant, Robert Miller. And they basically, they said, go on out there, set up this religious commune, find out all the real wacko, you know, religious people in there, get them in one place so we can keep track of them. We know that one of the so-called Patriot militia leaders was finally forced to admit that, yes, he's out there trying to stir up people to be buying guns and stuff to make it easier for the government to identify who is buying guns. And, of course, they've got their knickers in a twist over this whole 80% revolution because they can't keep track of where that stuff is going. And, you know, clearly this government is afraid of us. This government is prepared to fight and win a violent revolution in this country, which is why we have to think outside the box and win this revolution through information and education of our fellow American citizens and not giving the government an excuse to say, oh, my goodness, those American patriots, they're attacking us. We have to send in the tanks.
Right. Well, I certainly appreciate your knowledge in that. What do you think about the Walmarts closing in, you know, into along with this?
Well, there's a lawsuit that's already been filed by the employees of those stores because, as it turns out, the stores Walmart closed were the stores where the organization and protests for higher wages began. So it looks like an act of petty revenge by Walmart's management. Yes, we're going to give all of our workers a raise, but those stores that started this ruckus, we're closing them and you're all out of a job, so there. What are you going to do about it? And what they're doing about it is they're filing a class action lawsuit.
And you think that's all it is? You don't think the government's coming in and taking over the Walmart?
No, I don't think so. Well, you know,
there's been reports of a lot of seeing government action, police, you know, guarding Walmart,
well, you know, if the Walmart still have the inventory inside the store, which it's going to be certainly for a while. I mean, they basically closed them with like, you know, the workers went to work that morning thinking they had a job. They were let go that night. Obviously, the stores are still filled with a lot of inventory, and they don't want people just breaking down the glass and going on and helping themselves to that stuff. So I would not be surprised that these Walmarts are being guarded by the police until the trucks can basically empty the place out, okay?
Right. Well, I certainly pray that that is all that is, and I certainly appreciate your knowledge and appreciate your show.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the kind words.
Thank you for your knowledge. God bless America and keep it up, sir.
All right, I certainly will. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the economy, we're starting to see a lot of American corporations as more and more information leaks out about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Investment Trade Partnership. They're beginning to realize this is basically giving away what little remains of manufacturing in this country to all of these other parties there. And U.S. Steel is now saying if the Trans-Pacific Partnership is signed and opens the door to inexpensive steel imports from other countries, it means inevitably they will have to close facilities in the United States and lay off people primarily in Arkansas and Texas. Now, these Trans-Pacific Partnerships are really good because the goal of the money junkies is to separate production of products from the users and purchasers of those products by as great a distance as possible in order to sit astride the lines of communication, the lines of shipping, and extract more wealth that way, and to keep us all dependent on their global system, because we no longer can make our own steel, we can no longer grow our own food, we can no longer build our own cars. We have to be subservient to the New World Order to have any kind of a life at all. It's enforced dependency, and enforced dependency is enslavement. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and Fox News is wagging new nuke trouble. The nukes are out there. We've got to go to war against everybody. We've got to nuke them before they nuke us. The hysteria is rising. I got an email here. I got a phone call waiting. I'm going to get to you in just a second. I got an email. Is Israel going to attack Gaza over this one rocket that just flung over the fence and hit dirt? Yes. Because if you look back over this whole week, we have been pounded with Holocaust propaganda. The Holocaust, we've got to kill the Holocaust deniers. They found a bookkeeper from Auschwitz. This is not a guard. This is not somebody who was actually in contact with the prison population. He did the bookkeeping, the accounting. And they've hauled him up on trial in Germany as a Nazi war criminal. Use a pencil, go to jail. Some nonsense like that. And any time they start wagging the Holocaust and the Nazis and Hitler at us, and yes, the Hitler movies are all over cable TV this week, it tells us Israel's getting ready to do something really tacky. And Israel is trying to head off this push by the United Nations to get them to make peace with the Palestinians, because Israel does not want to make peace with the Palestinians. They want Palestine. By the way, the U.S. Congress just sent them an additional $260 million of your tax dollars. Because the last time Israel went into Gaza, they ran out of money. Poor little Israel. They're going broke. We have to give them money to go out and commit war crimes with. Really, it's because of the special relationship. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Robert in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. My name is Robert. Oh, I guess you already know. I'm calling because I see America from Canada, right? And I see that there's certain states like California, New York, that are like totally gun control. And then you got places like Texas and other states that are like making it even easier to get guns, it seems. So do you guys ever see like you as an American, like an area of America where it's like going to be old-fashioned America, like you still have guns, you still have rights, where there's maybe resistance of some kind? Just kind of curious, because, Canada, we don't have guns at all up here, so what's your perspective on that?
Well, let me ask you a question. How do you go hunting up in Canada? Because I understand hunting's real big up there.
Well, yeah, hunting, you can have a long gun, but you can, it's a pain in the neck to get. You got to go through registries.
Okay. So much for the Sportsman's Paradise advertising we see on those travel brochures. Yeah, there are some parts of the country that have gone totally overboard on disarming the American people. In fact, out in California, there was actually a bill proposed, did not pass, where it would be illegal for citizens to own machetes and axes unless they were professional gardeners and groundskeepers licensed by the state. I mean, that's how ridiculous and wacko it's getting. Over in Vermont, of course, they've got a very easy conceal carry law. Put the gun in your pocket, go on outside. And not surprisingly, Vermont has very low crime. But yeah, some governments are just out there. They want the American people completely disarmed, so we can't argue back when they do more stupidity. And there are parts of the country right now where their elected leaders are realizing that gun rights has become a major issue for the elections. And, Texas, the Texas identity is very much tied up with their gun culture. And, I'm obviously coming from New England, having been raised with firearms and a hunting culture. I think the Second Amendment says it right out there. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and that means all arms, not just guns. Some states are already outlawing swords, certain kinds of knives, but the United States Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Miller that the Second Amendment does reserve to the American people weapons equivalent to what the military currently carry. And I know a lot of the people, the gun grabbers are out there saying, well, we support the Second Amendment, and you can have all the muskets that you want because that's what they had when the Second Amendment was in there. But in point of fact, the Second Amendment, and even Thomas Jefferson wrote, the Second Amendment is not about hunting, it's not about target shooting. It is about giving the people the means to tell the government, leave us the heck alone. Let us go about our business, stop tinkering with our lives, stop tinkering with our business, stop tinkering with our health, our food, and our water. Go away and leave us alone. That's what the Second Amendment is all about. And the Supreme Court recognized that ultimate purpose of the Second Amendment because it talks about the security of a free state and the militias, which includes not just the organized militia, the National Guard, but the unorganized militia, which is the rest of us. And that's why they said, yeah, the Second Amendment is all about the same kind of weapons the military has. And, I grew up in an age where you were punished for bad actions, not for possession of certain things you weren't supposed to have. And that is a major, major transition from a free society to a dictatorship when they criminalize the ownership of items, even if you're not doing anything wrong with them.
Do you think they'll be successful in getting rid of the guns then?
They're probably going to grab a bunch of them, and every time they have a gun buyback, there's always a large group of people who will gladly steal a gun away from a family member and turn it in for that bag of groceries or whatever. But the reality that the government is having to deal with is, of course, it's not that difficult to make a gun. And, a lot of people do as a hobby. When I was younger, I made black powder guns. And for one thing, the black powder guns teach you how to place your shots because you only have the one shot. It's not like you go out there and you've got all the bullets you need to just sort of spray them in the general direction and hope the target falls down. You learn to make a single shot count, and that makes you actually a better shooter than somebody with a modern machine gun. But the reality is there is a whole subculture starting to grow in this country of people who are building military-capable weapons, like the Ghost 80s, the AR-15s. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would presume it, somebody out there has already figured out how to reverse engineer that sear to turn it into a selective fire weapon.
Oh, I see. So, yeah, you didn't really answer my first question, though, do you see America breaking up into, different areas that some areas are safe and not safe, or is it all going to be just one giant prison camp?
I do see a possibility of the United States balkanizing when the federal government falls apart and the Federal Reserve crashes. And I would see the breakup being the Northeast, the original 13 colonies, maybe a few other, the Confederacy. And we already know that going back to the 1990s, there's been a group called the Western States Coalition saying that they just wanted to break off California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, and a couple of others, and to be their own nation and not be interfered with by these tyrants 3,000 miles away. So it could happen. I would prefer not to see it happen just out of an affection for the United States of America. But again, I think humanity is best served by a world with 1,000 small nations taking care of themselves, and rather than a single global government that is running the planet for their own personal profit and glory. Okay.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for your time. I really would love to talk to you for another hour, but you got us a guest. So take care and all the best down there.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and watch out for all that snow and ice that's hitting up there again. All righty, now then, getting on back to the economy. Down in Puerto Rico, they're in serious trouble. Their officials are warning that the Puerto Rican government is on the verge of a shutdown. They are absolutely flat broke out of money. Meanwhile, up here in the United States of America, something you need to be paying attention to. This is from MarketDailyNews.com. FDIC plots a bank heist involving your accounts, and they're talking about the preparations being made, the legal preparations being made for bail-ins, at which point The banks, which are proving themselves to be untrustworthy, in fact, they're turning out to be the biggest bank robbers of all, are in connivance with the government to redefine your relationship with the bank from being a depositor to an unsecured investor in order to open the doors quasi-legally to simply grab your money when the banks need it. And it won't be just a little bit of grabbing, because people will start closing their accounts at that point. When they do it, it'll be all at once like they did in Cyprus. And so one more time, I would have no more money in the bank than I need to cover my immediate obligations. Keep the rest under your own control in your own home. Some of it in currency and some of it in physical silver and gold. Because the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And we are on the doorstep of that right now here in the United States of America. Stands as quite a sharp contrast with Iceland and their economic revolution. And you're not going to hear a lot about that here in the American corporate media, because what Iceland did to turn their economy around was just simplicity itself. Throw the crooked bankers in prison, write off the debt created through fraud. And, of course, when they did that, the rest of the banking community around the world were just ganging up on them. No, you will love your crooked banks or we'll cut off your international credit. And Iceland said, go ahead. We're just going to take care of ourselves for a while. And they're doing very well indeed. We got to take a break for news. Joanne in Canada, you're going to have to wait through the news break before I take your phone call, but I will get to you in the next segment. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We got a couple of calls I'm going to get to in just a second. But over the news break, I got a bunch of emails from people in Canada saying that Canada, like the United States, varies from place to place in the availability and presence of guns, and that there are many places in Canada, because hunting is so popular and in some places necessary for survival, that it is very easy to get guns and to own guns. And so there's the story on that. All righty, let's see. We're going to go to the phones here. Joanne in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
This is probably off topic, but yesterday morning the CBC and the CTV have both stated that there was a JAMA study that provides more evidence that the MMR vaccines are not linked to autism. The reporter, reading from his prepared notes and a teleprompter, specified that the anti-vaccinators' attitudes have caused a drop in immunization rates and, in turn, a rise in the outbreak of measles in Europe and North America. Mm-hmm. He also stated that these findings indicated no harmful association between MMR vaccine recipients and ASC, even among children already at a higher risk of autism spectrum disorder. This reporter attacked British researcher Andrew Wakefield's character, calling him a discredited source. He also stated that Jenny McCarthy needed to apologize to the planet, and Robert Kennedy Jr. is nothing but an anti-vaccine agitator. Nothing was mentioned about William Thompson, a senior scientist at the Center of Disease Control and one of the authors of a 2004 study published in the journal Pediatrics, revealed that there was data that was not included in the final report. Vaccinations are not mandatory in Canada. It can't be because of the Canadian Constitution. I got the measles as a child from my siblings. All of us contracted the measles naturally. So my two-part question for you is, why is the public health agencies of Canada overwhelming the corporate media outlets with a pro-campaign to vaccinate all Canadians? And because I contracted the measles as a small child, am I not naturally immune?
Yes, you are. To answer the second part of your question first, what's going on in Canada and the United States, and frankly, my response to CBC is you are no more trustworthy than the American corporate media, because you are corporate media. Right now, both Canada and the U.S. are trying to prop up their economies by forcing people to buy products they may not want and may not need, may even be harmful. The desire to get more tax revenues flowing is so intense that the idea that what we're being forced to buy might be harmful is irrelevant. And as a matter of fact, the measles outbreaks we have been seeing are among the people getting the vaccine. And I'm going to be talking about vaccines a lot in our third hour. There's been a new document leaked from GlaxoSmithKline that they have known for years that their vaccines were causing more autism. And so whatever the CBC is out there, they're doing smear jobs against Jenny McCarthy and Robert Kennedy Jr., and that's exactly what they are. They're smear jobs, and that right there tells you this is not science, this is politics, this is marketing. And CBC, like the American networks, makes a huge amount of money from pharmaceutical advertising, and they don't want to lose that. And these pharmaceutical companies will say, your news departments will support our point of view, or we'll take our advertising someplace else. Now, this latest study is already compromised. The people who paid for it are financially tied in with the vaccine and health industry. It's not an independent assessment. And basically what they're saying is, okay, the last study that we had that there was no link between vaccines and autism was an absolute hoax, but we've got a brand new study that says exactly the same thing, that you should trust us is perfectly honest. And that is nonsense on the face of it. Now, regardless of the safety and efficacy of the vaccines, which are an issue, but setting those aside, I would hold it as the most inalienable of rights to decide what goes in your body and what does not. And I think we have reached a terrible condition when the government decides for us what we'll eat, what medicines we'll take, what we're not allowed to eat, what medications we're not allowed to have. And all of it is there to drive money out of our pockets into the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies, with the governments getting a mafia-like piece of the action out of the tax revenues. And this desperation to keep these debt-based economies going forward has completely overridden any other considerations about health, safety, and what's actually good for the people.
Michael, thank you for highlighting this important subject. I am tired of listening to the corporate media having a biased point of view. The corporate media are starting to be the irresponsible media, and that is why they are losing the respect of the public. So thank you for highlighting this on your program.
Well, thank you for the kind words. We're going to let you go here now and switch over to Eric in Los Angeles. Eric, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just had two questions. The first one is a pretty boring one. It's just, I guess, asking for your advice about computers. Now, I had a lot of problems in the past with, like, an old Mac, and then had, they say you're not supposed to get viruses, but it seemed like I got one. So I was setting up a new computer, and I was wondering what would be the best antivirus program. I know, like, Norton used to be considered the best, but I don't know if that was just, you know, oh, it's more expensive, so, or if there's a better, I just want, like, basically to have it the most, well guarded, I guess.
Well, the problem is that a lot of earlier antivirus products were very good. Then they got acquired by other companies. When Peter Norton still ran Norton, they put out really good products and really good antivirus. Then Peter Norton sold out his company, and the new owners, the products they put out were not only not all that secure, they actually opened up more security holes than they had closed. It's almost like the storyline out of The Net, the Sandra Bullock film, where the supposed amazing security company was actually breaking into the computers it was supposed to be securing. And it changes from time to time. Every year there's a different opinion as to what the best are. Kaspersky is still pretty good. They're not perfect. Sometimes if you've got enough horsepower on your computer, you want a layered approach where there's first of all, your firewall is your first line of defense. Your router should have a firewall. That should be on. Then your computer has a firewall. You've got antivirus. Then you've got malware scan. And the more you have, the more you're going to catch. But in the end, all of this stuff is backdoored by the NSA, even your computer and the router itself, down to the silicon itself. So if you have something that you need to keep private, you have to invest the time writing your own encryption system.
Yeah. I don't really know much about computers, I guess. So you're saying, I heard like Kaspersky, you said that, because someone else told me Avast or like Adware Medic is asking if a problem, but for the router, what's a firewall router like?
Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably don't want to start tinkering with that. Basically, you log into the router like it's another computer on your local area network, and there should be a web interface, a web page where you go in and you set options. But if you don't know how to set up a firewall and open and close certain ports, you don't want to play with that, or you could actually paralyze the whole system. You had another, well, we're coming up on a commercial break, so I'm going to have to hold you and this other caller over the commercial break. So between now and the commercial, some more economic news. Hungary, Greece, and Cyprus are going to resume trade with Russia. They're basically saying we're not part of these stupid sanctions wars that are going on. And Russia is saying that's absolutely fine. We want to get back to peace through commerce and stop all this weaponization of sanctions to coerce our obedience to the American empire, because these days fewer and fewer people are taking the American empire seriously, even with all their nuclear weapons. Probably a big part of it is looking at our non-nuclear weapons and what absolute overpriced pieces of junk they are. Now, the Eurasian Economic Union, yet another parallel system to the Fed, and Mercosur are going to sign a memorandum of cooperation. So these alternatives to the Federal Reserve and SWIFT are starting to really grow across the globe. Got to take a 4-minute break for commercials. We'll be back with phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the phone here to Eric in Los Angeles. Eric, you had one more question that you wanted to ask.
Okay, yeah. Actually, it was a comment, really. I don't know if you saw this, but I just saw they said that Adam Gadon was killed in a strike on the Afghan-Pakistani border, and they're still making it like he's an American mouthpiece for Al-Qaeda.
Well, they reported Adam Gadon got killed back in 2008, and then he rose from the grave and demanded brain or something. Same thing with al-Baghdadi. And like I said earlier in the show, they're basically recycling the bad guys. You know, we need a victory. All right, today we killed this guy. And then they wait a little while, hope you forgot that they claimed to kill him, then they claim to kill him again. And then he shows up again. I mean, the real Osama bin Laden died in December of 2001 of natural causes, and look how they kept recycling him with all these phony guys with the makeup, and he kept getting younger and younger and less gray until they killed somebody at Abbottabad and dumped his body in the ocean, and they put out those pathetic, lame, faked photos all over the net to try and convince us all that they had finally gotten the real Osama bin Laden, who had already been reduced to a skeleton wherever he's buried.
Now, was there an actual picture from afterwards? At first, I heard that there was no actual pictures. Then there's another one where they show this guy dead, with like looks almost like bullet holes in his head. But then there's another one that shows just like this random guy, and they like superimposed, photoshopped bin Laden's head on. But I don't know if that was just type of a poisoning well type of thing, where it's like, oh, that's completely fake. There was never ever released any photos of bin Laden, you know.
Well, if you go to whatreallyhappened.com and look in the little tiny submenu in the gray bar up at the top, and you'll see a gallery of fake dead bin Ladens in which all of these photos that were leaked out have been exposed as fakes. And we have a confirmation that at least one of them is the exact same photo that was being shown to members of Congress by the Obama administration to claim victory for having gotten the supervillain of the age. And after we tore these images apart online and found the source images from Hollywood movies used to make them, that is when the White House said, we will be releasing no more photos of Osama bin Laden out of a respect for Muslim sensibilities and funeral, you know. In other words, they're still not really up to speed on the fact that they can't get away with these kind of lies anymore. For no other reason than they're outnumbered. For every one government propagandist putting out a lie, there are 10,000 Americans who know more about the subject than he does, looking at what he's doing and tearing it to pieces.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Sorry for sounding I'm a little nervous. So sorry for sounding all over the place. I guess the last two things I'll just hang up and let you ask if you have the time is, I guess I was just curious about, you said that you thought Ted Kaczynski was a patsy, and also, when I was talking about computers before, what is your opinion on, I heard pre-2008 computers are good because they don't have the built-in stuff. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, well, we know that the U.S. government sets up patsies, whether it's Kaczynski, Timothy McVeigh, the people at Waco. The government has to manufacture enemies for you to be afraid of, to get you to do what they want you to do. And again, George Orwell warned us all of this tactic in his novel 1984. And if you've never read it, you should. Or at the very least, see the movie. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Rose up in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing all right.
Good. You know, I just got to tell you, we're freezing here in Canada still.
Gosh darn that human-caused global warming.
I'm still waiting for it to happen, I'm telling you. I just wanted to, you had the previous caller, the gal from Canada, who was talking about the push for vaccines here.
Yes.
And she was talking about CBC, and you had said they were doing it for drug advertising revenue.
Yes.
We actually don't allow drug advertising in Canada.
You don't.
But,
I stand corrected on that. I mean,
so, you know what? This is how CBC and they circumvent that by promoting drugs in the media, like the vaccines. There have been so many articles. Yeah, and they're just getting around it.
It's clandestine. It's product placement, and we see that a lot in what is supposed to be regular news coverage here. We're seeing these prepackaged, made by PR firm blurbs that push a certain point of view and a certain product. And so maybe they don't have overt commercials. In fact, if I recall correctly now, I think the United States is one of only 3 industrialized nations that allow TV advertising for prescription medications. And but there are other ways to get those products out there. And
that's exactly what CBC does, because we can see the advertising if we get an American station. We'll see, you know, all the advertising for the drugs with all the horrible side effects following closely afterwards. But so I just wanted to tell you that. But the CBC, she mentioned them specifically, and I've been duking it out on the boards there, what they call the boards where you post your comments. CBC censors so heavily when it comes to taking a sort of questioning position about vaccines. They will censor all of my comments, one after another, after another, after another.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, because those anti-vaxxers are cutting into the profits of those big pharmaceutical corporations, and if the pharmaceutical corporations aren't making as much money, then those campaign donation checks to politicians get smaller and smaller, and that cannot be allowed to stand.
That's exactly it. And you know what really annoys me? Because as a Canadian, we pay about $1 billion tax dollars to keep CBC because it's supposed to be our broadcaster.
Yeah.
And so when you're not even allowed to express your own opinion, abiding by all the rules, and they just cut you off because it doesn't suit the agenda, they just delete all your comments, it's very maddening. Very maddening.
I can imagine. Well, you know, keep up the good fight here, and if people want to get a vaccine, go ahead. It's your choice to make, and that's my point. It should be our choice, not forced on us by a government. And remember, the last time the U.S. government mandated a vaccination program in 1976, the vaccine killed 50 times as many people as the illness we were being vaccinated against.
Oh, exactly. And look at the polio vaccine when they brought that out.
That's
that was
true, the oral polio vaccine.
With the simian virus, you know.
Well, over and above that, the oral polio vaccine, which was supposed to be attenuated, reverted to full potency and actually gave people polio. Just like all these measles, mumps outbreaks where you find out 95% of the kids getting sick had the vaccination. I mean, common sense has to tell you it's not the non-vaccinated people who are the problem. It is a faulty vaccine itself. Anyway, listen, Rose, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go and try and sneak Tony from New York in here before the commercial break. Tony, what's going on?
How are you, Mike? Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, yeah. I was just wanting to tell you that about an hour ago, it says it's 45 degrees here in upstate New York, near Saratoga. And it was snowing, like a good snow squall.
Gosh darn that, human-caused global warming. Well, you know what Al Gore is saying there? You're just hallucinating. That's not snow. It's just white, lumpy rain. Okay? So use the correct, approved terminology.
Yes. Oh, by the way, about the polio vaccine, are you aware about the congressional testimony? I believe it was the AMA was brought in front of Congress in the 50s.
Okay, Tony, Tony, I'm going to have to put you on hold for 4 minutes. We got to take another commercial break. Don't hang up because I do want to come back to this, okay? So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at Fox News, and their big story here is how Robert Downey Jr. walked out of an interview supposedly promoting his latest movie after being asked an impertinent question. And I'll agree with Downey on this one. This reporter was trying to make himself look good by hardball questions, which you should do to politicians, but Robert Downey Jr. is an actor. Very good one, too. I loved his Chaplin, absolutely. All right, we're going to go back here to Tony in New York, and you had one more issue you wanted to raise.
Well, yeah, I was talking about when the AMA, I believe it was, and I'm not in front of a computer, so I can't I can't check it. It's been a while since I looked into it. But they got brought in front of Congress when the polio vaccine was first introduced. And they were forced to admit that they fudged the numbers to show the efficacy of that vaccine. And what they did was they shortened the paralysis, if I remember correctly, to show that if it was less than 20 days or something, it was meningitis. Anything above that was polio, or vice versa. But it was such a dramatic turn, and Congress was saying that how could this happen when polio was just when the vaccine was just introduced? And you could see an inverse relationship between polio going down and meningitis going up. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, that was basically the deal. Is they fudged the numbers to make it look like the vaccine was working, so more and more people would take the vaccine. They were doing it then. They're doing it now. And, you know, apparently pharmaceutical companies long ago decided that actually making money by selling medicine to sick people who needed it wasn't profitable enough, and those sick people, if they died, their families, they're just pesky lawsuits and everything. So the new business model for the pharmaceutical industries is selling medicine to perfectly healthy people. And they are on the same moral level as those traveling Wild West medicine shows that would go from town to town talking about a plague on the Great Plains that was laying waste to the Native Americans, and, you know, they'd be selling bottles full of pepper oil or who knows what all else was in there. They'd make a lot of money. The townspeople would drink the medicine, think they were protected against an imaginary disease, and it was just a huge scam. And it seems like our modern pharmaceutical industry has basically decayed back to that same mindset.
Yeah, I don't think it ever left that mindset. And not only that, the argument is that, you know, vaccines, they don't make a lot of money for the drug companies or the medical establishment. But it really, that's not true. If you consider the cost of just a doctor's visit, just to walk into that office will cost you $100. And also, these vaccines are known to make you sick. So not only are they giving medication to people that don't need it, but then after getting that shot, then you've got asthma, you've got a lot of long.
Look at all the problems with Gardasil. We're going to be talking about that one a little bit later on. They're starting to tally up all the damage from that one. But hey, from the point of view of the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company, they put out a measles vaccine. They sucker some people into getting it for their kids. The kids start getting measles, and the media says, oh, my goodness, it's a measles outbreak. The rest of you better rush on down and get your vaccine. And I want to hammer home an important point here. According to the CDC, not a single American has died from measles in the last 10 years, but the vaccine court recognizes over 100 people have died from the measles vaccine. So if I had a kid, I'd look at those numbers and say, I'd rather my kid get the measles, you know, and with a 100% guarantee that he will survive, then get that measles vaccine with a very real possibility that the kid could die.
Or have lifelong neurological disorders that require...
Absolutely, or peanut anaphylaxis. They've started to realize that this peanut anaphylaxis, which can be lethal if you're exposed to peanut dust, is a byproduct of the use of peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant.
Right, there's a big difference between ingesting and injecting.
Absolutely. Your body is not designed to react to peanut oil in your veins. It's perfectly okay with the peanut oil in your stomach, but the adjuvants provoke a reaction so that your body develops supposedly a response to the pathogen, but at the same time it develops a response to the adjuvant. And that's where this epidemic of peanut anaphylaxis is coming from. They're sticking, you know, I was talking to my wife the other day about how the current flu vaccine, which now they're admitting doesn't actually work, it's got stuff in there like formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, and for people who are sensitive to it, like Claire, causes intense joint pain. I mean, that's embalming fluid. Your flu vaccine includes embalming fluid. But hey, since the government says you can't sue the vaccine makers, they can put whatever they want in there.
And the aerosol, they did not remove that from food.
No, they never did. They never did. And now you can't sue them, and now the government is saying you will take this stuff, and we don't care if it's harmful or not. We need you to buy these products to keep the economy going.
All right. Another real quick thing that I've been meaning to ask you for a long time. It's totally unrelated. When Obama, a few years ago, at a correspondence dinner, are you aware that he had said, he pointed to somebody in the audience and he was jokingly saying, and over to Michael Rivero's table. And
I never heard anything like that. No, I never.
Well, that's what got me listening to your show, believe it or not.
He actually said, I'm having a hard time buying that one, but if somebody finds a video of it, I would be delighted to put it in my memories file. Anyway, Tony, listen.
I said to myself, who is Michael Rivero? And I looked into it, and then I started listening to your show, and I thought about it ever since. So I'll try to find it in the email.
Please do. I never heard anything about that. I mean, the White House ignores me. We send them a Christmas card. We never get one back. The only time I've gotten a communication from the White House is during the 2012 election. I had these cool little puppets of Obama and Romney, and after the election was over, I couldn't bring myself to just throw them in the trash. So I just boxed them up and I sent them to the White House and said, "Attention, Presidential Museum Coordinator." And I'm sure the Secret Service had them for a week there with x-rays and swabs and biological and everything, from that dangerous Mike Rivero. But eventually they figured out it was just the puppets. It was a gift to the museum. And I did get a nice thank you note from Obama's presidential library staff on that. Other than that, they've ignored me, except for, I think it was 3 Christmases ago when the Secret Service was checking us out when Obama was out here on the island. And other than that, they leave me alone and I leave them alone. Anyway, listen, Tony, I have to let you go now. Thank you for the call. And we've got Arash in Toronto's been waiting very, very patiently. Thank you for your patience. What's on your mind?
No problem, Mike. Thank you very much. I know it's a little off topic, but I wanted to get your opinion on purchasing gold. You know how the oil prices have been manipulated, and that's caused the Canadian dollar to take a dive, basically 20% below parity. And I was wondering if it's advisable or if it would be wise for me to go and buy gold at $1,500 Canadian an ounce in this present climate.
Gold prices are being manipulated right alongside the oil prices, and yes, if your currency is being devalued, that is a concern. But you need to look at the current gold price. Has it been pushed up because of the devaluation of the Canadian dollar to a significant degree? And nobody should be buying gold and silver for the short term because the volatility is out there swamping you. Your gold dealer for small volumes is going to be charging a 15% uplift. That's how they pay the rent on their dealership. But just as a general rule of thumb, if you have any extra cash that's not going anywhere, get yourself some gold and silver, physical. Go to an established dealer with a permanent address so you know where to find them if something goes wrong down the road. These days, you see a lot of silver dealers at the flea markets. You have to stay away from them because that's where most of the phony coins and phony bars are showing up.
Right. And I understand that gold, it's not that the price of gold really goes up and down. It's a hedge against like a falling currency. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Gold's value is pretty much fixed because it is a fixed commodity that does not change over time. And if we were to denominate the economies based on gold, we'd realize that both the U.S. and Canada are in serious, serious trouble, because of all the inflation. Anyway, thank you for the call. We got to let you go. Take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And somebody just sent me a web page, supposedly where this story where Obama referenced me during the correspondence dinner, and it looks to me like it was a hoax, and obviously I'm flattered that I was mentioned in this, but it's obviously a hoax, and so forth and so on. Anyway, we'll get a giggle out of that. I'll still print it out and put it in the history file. Taco Bell is taking lobbying to a whole different direction. They're up there lobbying the Congress to prevent workers from organizing and getting health care. And they brought along 6,000 free tacos. And I think maybe they've underbid what it costs to buy a congressman, or maybe because it is a buyer's market right now for corruption, that maybe a taco is all it takes to get a congressman to change their vote on an issue. So maybe we should all send Congress a taco and call for the restoration of the Bill of Rights. Now, interestingly enough, and this I think suggests some real weakness within the heart of the federal government itself, because the food workers and janitors in the Congress are struggling. There was a story about how one of the cooks in the congressional kitchen who makes the meals for members of Congress is working like 2 jobs and still has to be on food stamps for his children. And as a result, about 40 of the contract workers from the United States Senate walked off their jobs yesterday and joined more than 1,000 labor activists at a rally calling on Obama, saying, hey, you know, we're here taking care of you. You got to take care of us. But the new model is everybody poor and on government handouts, because when you're on a government handout, you will do as you are told to do. Dependency is slavery. King George III understood that. Obama understands that. Now then, for those of you who are aficionados of cable TV, a little bit of good news. Comcast has decided to call off their attempt to merge with Time Warner Cable. They've spent a huge amount of money, huge amount of lobbying, meeting increasing resistance, and finally, I guess they decided to pull the plug. So the Comcast-Time Warner merger is not going to happen. So maybe Time Warner will actually go out and start repairing some of the cables and other issues we have around here. Earlier today, the Senate confirmed Loretta Lynch as the new Attorney General. The media is just in paroxysms of joy. She's the first African-American woman to hold the position. Well, I'm sorry. The fact that she's African-American or not, or that she's male or female, is irrelevant to the job that she is going to do. And something the corporate media is not mentioning is that Loretta Lynch is a gun grabber. She's opposed to guns. She wants all Americans disarmed and helpless before the almighty central government. Now, even though it is way too early in the 2016 campaign season to really know what's going on, because a lot of people are still making choices whether they're going to step in or not, but as of right now, Clinton and Marco Rubio are leading in the polls, and Rubio is trailing Hillary by only 2 points. So at the moment, these are the 2 front runners for the 2 traditional parties. And they didn't even have me on the poll at all, so I'm feeling snubbed and insulted here at this point. Now, Hillary Clinton has hired a former Monsanto lobbyist as her campaign manager, and he's got his work cut out for him already, because the big story that is getting coverage, and this is coming out of the New York Times, was picked up by the corporate media, regarding a $2.35 million donation from a Russian-owned uranium corporation. This was not officially disclosed, as it is supposed to be. If you have a charitable foundation, you still have to file paperwork on it, what money comes in, where it comes from. Not just use it as your portable, disconnected money laundry, the way that Hillary was using her private email server. And what is making this look very questionable is at the same time that this Russian-owned uranium company was making this very generous gift to the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, they were lobbying to gain control of uranium resources up in Canada, and Hillary Clinton was lobbying on their behalf. We have got to keep all of these scandals and corruptions alive. And maybe we shouldn't wait until the campaign is well underway. Maybe we need to get it out there right now. Now, Hillary's people are going to say next year, oh, it's all old news. No, it isn't. Not if we keep it current. We're in charge of our own information now. The corporate media has lost control of it. So have the politicians. We will decide what's important. We will decide what is relevant in our thought processes as to who or what we will support politically. Now, we put a link to a video up on whatreallyhappened.com. This is one of many videos surrounding the CIA's gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas while Bill Clinton was governor there. And they were all making money hand over fist. They're talking about Barry Seal, the fat lady, all of the companies that were supplying the parts for the gun running, that were getting laundered drug money through the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. This particular video is called The MENA Connection, exposing the CIA, Bush, Clinton, Iran, Contra, and drug running. It centers on Terry Reid, who was a pilot for the drug running operation. He wrote a book called Compromised Clinton, Bush, and the CIA. Don't bother looking for it at your local brick-and-mortar bookstore. It is very hard to find copies, even though at one time it was listed as a bestseller. And it's a very long video. It's over 2 hours. You might want to bookmark it and save it for some time when you don't have a lot of other things to be dealing with right now. We're going to grab a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, that woman who called about the vaccines and the media, how they, demoralize people who are against it's because we're fascists. When are people going to realize this? The merger between corporate and state. This is fascism.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. The pharmaceutical companies are saying we're going to make lots of money, pumping detergent into little kids' arms, and if they die, we'll blame the parents and say it's shaken baby syndrome, and the government says, all right, we'll help you push it there because we're going to get part of the profits in taxes. And there are no other considerations going on right now.
It's not just us, though. It's the British government, the Australian government. Look at them, the census people. If you don't want to do the census, what do? They put you in jail. It's fascism, people. When are people going to realize it?
Well, you need to understand, when any nation is sold into the slavery of a private central bank and the debt starts piling up, sooner or later that debt will force that nation into fascism. Vladimir Lenin predicted that when capitalism failed, it would decay into fascism without exception, and that's exactly what's happened in the United States. It's happened all across the European Union, Great Britain. Every single nation enslaved to a privately owned central bank issuing the public currencies alone at interest loses their economic way. They're driven into poverty and hardship, and ultimately their government is driven into fascism just to keep that little pyramid going a tiny, tiny bit longer.
And China is more a free market than we are, people. In a lot of countries, Russia, and you see we're so, Wall Street is a rigged market. The economy is rigged. It's rigged.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. We've lost most of our freedoms. Yeah, the Russian republics are a lot more free than the United States. So is China.
People are in denial, Mike. I mean, there's a percentage of people
I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that's true. They're staying silent out of a misguided sense of politeness and loyalty, but every time I crack a joke to anybody about what's going on, I'll get a smile and a laugh. They know what's going on. We're just approaching that point.
The problem is fascism. It's going to get worse here. People don't realize.
It is, but the people are reaching that breaking point where they're not going to be polite or loyal any longer, and they're going to stand up and say, look, this government is a bunch of fascist jerks, and I'm not going to pay attention to them any longer. Anyway, Dustin, listen, I got to let you go. We've got our top of the hour news break. We're going to have to take a break here. Thank you for the phone call. Meanwhile, Gowdy over there in the Congressional Committee investigating Benghazi is saying because of uncontrollable circumstances, their final report will be delayed until 2016. So even though Hillary's lawyer is saying she's going to testify now, Gowdy is going to make sure this is current news during the height of the election season. So much for Hillary's campaign strategy of, oh, Benghazi is old news. No, it's going to be current right in the middle of the election. We'll be back after the news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We got 2 callers waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute. Couple of stories out here. Speaking about Mark Rubio, who is, as of last report, just 2 points behind Hillary Clinton. He's apparently number 1 in the Sheldon sweepstakes. Now, we're talking about Sheldon Adelson, who is this very pro-Israel casino owner. He is, I think, still in legal trouble in China for bribing some of their officials, but he pours huge amounts of money into the GOP. And it is a reminder that right now, in this time, in this era, the political system is dominated by a few individuals with huge amounts of money to spend. And ordinary Americans like you and I writing out $10 campaign donation checks, we just don't matter anymore. Now, in between confirming Loretta Lynch and passing cybersecurity, apparently the Senate has approved a bill, and I'm not kidding you, 93-7 to approve a defense authorization bill that includes a provision which not only repeals the military law on sodomy, repeals the military ban on sex with animals. I am presuming that the raping of female members of their units is still considered a crime, but the way they're going, I don't know. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. We're going to go to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah. Referring back to what Justin said, I'm one of believe in spoiling these things. So when the census appeared in the UK, and under the question sex, there's the little box with M and F and what have you. So I wrote in as often as possible, please.
Yeah, that's what I put in there. F with luck 2 times a week. I haven't M'd in a while.
Actually, the census following that, they changed it to gender instead of sex. And the other one was, they were asking your ethnic origin. And I wrote in my whole history, which was, my great-grandparents were Scottish-Irish. My grandparents were Irish-English, and I think there was a bit of Welsh in there. So I wrote it all in a long spiel.
Well, I just left a sample of my genetic material on that part of the form.
So I believe in confusion. So.
Well, here's the situation. The census is authorized by the Constitution merely to count people, to set the district boundaries and various other population-denominated functions of the central government. There is nothing in the Constitution about the federal government coming into your home and asking what medications you're on, what your beliefs are about anything, how many guns you have, all of these very intrusive questions, where the government is, first of all, prying into your personal lives, and second, they're acting as a marketing research organization for private corporations, because all of this census data is made available to marketers so they know who to go to sell whatever it is they're going to sell.
Absolutely. Moving on from that, I'm looking at this nonsense that's going on in Ukraine. I don't know whether you've covered it yet or not. With all the wet work that seems to be happening there now.
Yeah, and we're finally starting to see some people in the corporate media are taking notice of it simply because it's been a big story in the independent media. But I mean, for Kiev to come on out now and say that all those people who died in the trade union building, they set themselves on fire, and that's right out of Waco. And where's all these suspicious suicides? The poor guy was depressed and he shot himself in the back of the head twice. It's just more of the same, and I find it hard to believe they actually think anyone's going to believe this stuff, but that's just the official story, and they're going to stick with it no matter how ridiculous they look.
Well, the video, surely, of this fire in Odessa showed these young girls filling the bottles full of petrol and the guys running up to the building and throwing them. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. The evidence doesn't support the official story, but at this point, all Kiev can do is say, this is the official story, and anybody who doesn't agree is going to get really depressed tomorrow.
Yeah, well, that's the point I wanted to make about the census. I answered all the questions as accurately as possible when they asked me for my height. Instead of writing it, instead of ticking the little boxes and what have you, I wrote in 0.0012 chains.
I gave my height in furlongs. All right, well, listen, John, I got to let you go. We got a ton of stuff. We're in our third hour, and I got a lot of stuff I got to get to, so thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. But yeah, see, there are ways to resist the dictatorship that are inoffensive and humorous and fun. And I learned the hard way working through Ancestry.com. We were trying to track some of Claire's family history through some of the census records, and boy, do they make a lot of mistakes. So it's not a reliable source of information anyway, other than very general statistical calculations about stuff. All righty then. Anyway, let's see. Illinois law would force state to boycott companies accused of boycotting Israel. Isn't it nice that the Illinois state government works so hard and tirelessly for Tel Aviv, while, of course, Illinois itself is not doing very well. We have been seeing an ongoing battle between Pamela Geller's hate group trying to put up posters on buses that demonize Muslims and call for their genocide and so forth. And then there are counter groups that are trying to put up posters with, you know, a more moderate, balanced approach to the issue of Israel and Palestine, and how we're seeing the courts continuously defend Pamela Geller's hate posters as freedom of speech, and yet they'll go along saying, well, these ones from Palestine, they might be divisive, they might be offensive, and it's okay to ban those. Very clear double standard. We're seeing the same thing in France. If you're poking fun at the Muslims and calling for their death, that's freedom of speech. If you dare be critical of Israel, that's hate speech and has to be silenced. However, over in New York City, there's a new ad campaign that is very critical of Israel. And joining this ad campaign to accuse Israel of genocide are some of the few remaining survivors of those Nazi slave labor camps in Germany. And for them to stand up and say, hey, we know what's going on, we recognize it, we've seen it before. And that takes a great deal of courage. Let's see, House of Representatives, another $286 million for Israel, because after that bottle rocket flew in from Gaza, we know that Israel is going to uncork on the Gazans yet again. Now, 5 years ago, when we here in the independent media were talking about echelon and interception of all of our communications in defiance of the Fourth Amendment, we were all called kooks, conspiracy theorists, wingnuts, tinfoil hat people. And today, 5 years later, even Wired magazine is out there having to say, well, you know, actually they were right with Edward Snowden's revelations. The government is spying on all of your communications in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And it's just something to remember, because over the decades, everything that we have reported on in the independent media is denounced as a conspiracy theory in the corporate media. And then it turns out to be true. Maybe we've reached a point where conspiracy theory is not going to be seen as dismissive, but an invitation that, hey, we should look into this, because there's something in here the government and corporate media don't want us looking at, as that crisis of confidence hits. And yes, the U.S. government and the corporate media are suffering a severe crisis of confidence, and they did it to themselves, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to talk about vaccines this segment. And somebody just sent me an article about how vaccine exemptions are under threat in Canada, the same thing that they're doing in California. Somebody sent me another article saying in Ontario, if you are not vaccinated, you will not be allowed to go to school. Now, I hold that it is the most inalienable of all human rights that we get to decide what goes in our body or not. Now, if the vaccines had a history of safety and efficacy, I don't think there'd be an issue out there. But we know there are serious problems going on with these medications. They're produced very quickly. They're marketed using fear tactics. They're harmful. And it's just all about selling us a product we don't really want and don't need in order to extract more wealth from us to prop up this Ponzi scheme economic structure. Now, we have a story at whatreallyhappened.com about a document leaked from within GlaxoSmithKline. It's a report. It's over 1,000 pages. And buried in the middle of it is the admission that GlaxoSmithKline knows their vaccines are tied to autism. They've got a chart, all the conditions. They know there's a problem. But you see, from the point of view of a pharmaceutical company, if they can sell you a vaccine, and that vaccine gives you, for example, cancer, then you are a loyal, reliable customer for the rest of your life. There's profitability. In an industry with zero sense of morality, I'm sure they see that as a positive. They sell us a medication, the medication gives us an illness. Oh, there's an opportunity to sell another medicine, and 2 or 3 more to deal with those side effects. They do not want a healthy population. In fact, a healthy population destroys their business model. All of this medical industrial complex, they need us to be sickly and chronically ill, either from their medications or chemicals in our food. They can make more money off of us if we're kept ill than if we attain health. And that's why they're trying to block off supplements, homeopathic therapy, stuff you grow at home. They're even trying to ban nanosilver. Don't even want you making that in your home. And now we have, despite this new report that came out that said exactly the same thing the CDC's now admitted fraudulent report said, but we're supposed to believe this one is okay, even though it was funded from entities with financial links to the vaccine and health industry. And now we have this document leaked from inside GlaxoSmithKline that says, yeah, it causes autism, but yeah, it's not that big a problem. Actually, it is. Autism among our children is epidemic right now. And everybody wants to duck the blame and, oh, it's somebody else's fault. It's like all these babies who are killed by vaccines. And we have this story that came out of VacTruth. 6-month-old baby dies just 5 days after receiving 13 vaccines. And what happens? The hospital reports the parents for shaken baby syndrome, and they take their other kid away. We can't admit the vaccines killed a kid. We'll lose business. We'll lose money. That can't be allowed. Yeah, we'll send a few parents to jail wrongfully, but that's their problem to deal with. Now, before I leave that, I noticed something very odd about the VacTruth website. Up until I visited that website, I've been using a website scoring system called Web of Trust. It's a plugin for Firefox that supposedly relies on user ratings to warn people off of fraudulent criminal websites. But that's been hijacked, because when I went to Web of Trust, I immediately got the banner, and I did a screen cap and posted it to my website about how this was a terrible website. It was unsuitable for children, completely untrustworthy and dangerous. I downloaded the actual website itself as source code and took a look. There's nothing dangerous in it. None of my other security popped up anything. And I have seen this before with Web of Trust, where websites that are challenging the orthodoxy, apparently some of their paid online shills will go into Web of Trust and say, oh, this is terrible, this is horrible. Maybe they've got bots running around doing it. So I've thrown out Web of Trust. It's obviously not trustworthy. It's being used to discourage people from looking at websites that the powers that be don't want you to look at. And it's just something you need to be aware of for any software or plugin that sets itself up to guide you through the net. It's probably compromised and hijacked. All right, so we have another article over at Activist Post. HPV vaccines and their devastating legacies. Now remember, this is a vaccination. Very expensive, $300 a shot. The doctor gets half of that. They're encouraging young girls, like age 10, to get this shot. And it's only good for 5 years, which means by the time these girls actually become sexually active, they need a second shot. Why not give them the shot when they become sexually active? Well, that would cut our profits in half. What's wrong with you? Now they want to give it to guys to protect them from cervical cancer, which tells you just how transparent this marketing is. But this particular group of vaccines are dangerous. And remember, they're vaccinating our kids. They're they're not mandating it yet, but they're heading that way. They're trying to get every child to take a vaccine for an illness they've got less than 0.1% chance ever encountering in the real world. So, looking at the CDC's own database, okay, over the last 10 years, adverse reactions to the HPV vaccines, permanently disabled, 1,311. 226 deaths. 7,700 did not recover from adverse symptoms. 685 abnormal pap smears. 265 cervical dysplasia. 102 got cervical cancer. Isn't that what this vaccine was supposed to prevent? Life-threatening event, 685. Emergency room treatment for adverse reactions, 12,429. Hospitalized with adverse reaction to the vaccine, 4,000. Extended hospital stay, 267. Serious condition, 5,418. Other adverse events, 38,217, for a total of 71,317 adverse effects, including deaths. And, of course, every time those people are having to go back for treatment, it's more money for the doctors and more money for the hospitals and more money for the pharmaceutical industry. And we have another article out here in Natural News. Whistleblowers reveal criminal practices of pharmaceutical industry in stunning interviews. And buried in there is the fact that, yes, the pharmaceutical industries are offering gifts and other bribes to doctors and care providers to push their product. And so your doctor may be telling you you need to have this, not because it's what's actually what you need, but because the doctor is working toward a trip to Hawaii or some such nonsense. We'll be right back after these few words, and I know we got a call waiting on the line. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get into human-caused global warming, we're going to take one more phone call. Ron in Missouri. Aloha, Ron. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind today?
Yes, Mike. That vaccine you were talking about?
Yes.
They give it to boys for to stop herpes, not cervical cancer.
Probably doesn't stop the herpes either. I mean, we know these pharmaceutical companies are going off label. You know, they're prescribing drugs that were created for one thing for something else, and it's been a huge scandal, and it's all driven by the money, and then they wonder why we don't trust their products.
It is terrible, I tell you.
It is. And, you know, people are turning away from that medical industrial complex. They're looking for alternatives. And the first thing the government says is, no, 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 you can't have an alternative. You will be dependent on the hospitals and the big pharmaceutical companies because that's what makes a good little slave. Anyway, Ron, listen, I'm going to let you go here. Thank you for the comment. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show because I got a bunch of stuff to get through. Now, we were talking yesterday about how below the equator, they're already seeing indications of a really severe winter on the way. Record cold temperatures already for what is their autumn. So, of course, in order that record snow and ice never, ever cause anybody to doubt the divinely revealed dogma of human-caused global warming, the University of Queensland's Global Change Institute has developed a free 7-week course to teach people how to argue with those who doubt human-caused global warming. If they would put that much effort into fact-checking the claims of the human-caused global warming aficionados, we would have a different outcome. It's not science, it's politics, it's propaganda. Now, yesterday was Earth Day, and President Obama was out there talking about global warming. And Mother Nature, which has an incredible sense of humor, is dropping snow all over the country today. It was snowing in Metro Detroit. They're expecting more coming in. Story out of Washington Post. Winter makes an annoying comeback with late April snow. Yes, let's hear it for human-caused global warming. Maine got snow. I got a reader letter. There's snow in New Jersey. I got that phone call earlier about that. And in point of fact, right now, today, snow has fallen in 23 of the 50 states of the United States. On April 23rd, we are well into spring, and it is still snowing. Australia is heading into autumn. They're getting record cold. It's time to wake up and smell the icicles. All those people screaming about global warming and carbon taxes are lying to you to get those carbon taxes, to get you to say, yes, please, Mr. Government, you decide for me how I will live my life, how big my home will be, what temperature I can keep it at, how long I can run my computer. Up in Toronto, they had, highways had to be closed because snow and ice led to jackknifed tractor trailers here. The power company in Quebec has actually sent out a mass email to all their customers apologizing for the high bills caused by the record cold winter because their customers had to pay 11% more than they did last year. And they're out there saying that, yeah, we're sorry about it, but it was a result of this really horrendously cold winter that you're all supposed to forget about as soon as Al Gore gets out there and makes another speech. So let's talk about the drought out in California. Everybody's upset over the new water restrictions that we're seeing out there, and they're very upset over the fact that for some reason corporations seem to be exempt from Governor Brown's new restrictions. Governor Brown is saying all the citizens of California have to cut their water usage by 25%, but not if you're a corporation. You get to go on doing whatever you want. Obviously, Nestle is number one. They have been sucking out water from California's aquifers without a valid permit because it expired like 20 years ago. And they bottle it up and sell it on the supermarket shelf. And the CEO of Nestle is out there saying he doesn't think water is a natural right of humans, that you should be made to pay for your water. You're not allowed to just collect it from the sky as rain. Oh, no, 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 no. That water belongs to the kings. Those are the king's raindrops. Knave, you will let them go into the aquifer where Nestle can suck them out and sell them back to you. Harris Cattle Ranch. More than 90% of California's water is used by agriculture, and they're not being asked to cut back, only the people. Occidental Petroleum is using huge amounts of water for their fracking operation. California Dairies and Paramount Farming. These are all large corporations, and I will concede a necessity for food companies to have access to water. But fracking and bottled water companies, absolutely not. And it's not confined to California. Because of the decay and collapse of the nation's water infrastructure, we're looking at 9 states that have shortfalls, that are starting to run low on water. Texas, Kansas, Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, Oklahoma, Utah, Nevada, and of course California is out there. Another story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Within 10 years, 40 of the 50 states will be suffering water shortages because they have not been improving and enlarging their water infrastructure to keep up with the expanding population, which according to the latest census reports, 80% of the population increase is coming from these illegal immigrants. Welcome them across the border, and all of you legal American citizens, you're just going to have to share your water with them. Now, down in Texas, researchers have studied the fracking situation and the sudden increase in earthquakes across Texas. And they have come to the inescapable conclusion it's caused by fracking. And the fracking industry doesn't like it, and they say there's got to be another cause. And the researchers are saying we can't find anything else other than the fracking going on in the regions where these quakes are starting to happen. Same thing happened in Oklahoma. And these researchers went out there and they said, is there another explanation? Is there something else that is increasing the seismicity? And they couldn't find anything. All righty, let's see. Getting on back to Fukushima, the story is not good over there. As you know, not too long ago, TEPCO sent in this high-tech robot to look into the interior of one of the reactors to evaluate the possibility of using robots to decommission, to carve up what's left of the core into small manageable pieces and take it out for disposal. That first robot locked up inside the reactor, they had to abandon it. They sent in a second robot because they built 2 of them. That one also failed from the high levels of radiation. There's nothing they can really do about that. There's been another halt of the water pumps at Fukushima, and they're having to dump radioactive water back into the ocean again. Again, still ongoing. And nobody knows what to do with those thousands and thousands of storage drums of highly radioactive water they've already got stored on the site. They don't know what to do with this. If you live in Australia, though, you're not going to have to worry about food contamination from Fukushima, because the government of Australia has decided to stop all testing of food imports from Japan and other Asian countries. You don't want to see those numbers anyway, right? I mean, they're depressing, and we don't want to see them anymore. So be happy and eat hearty and eat your fugu and your sushi and the rest of it, and just when you get sick, we've got hospitals that will be glad to sell you a treatment for your cancer. We'll be right back after these few words. Oh, hi, America. Pardon me. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today here. I'm getting emails from all over the U.S. and Canada saying, yeah, it's snowing here right now. Half inch in Ontario, a bunch of other places. Most of the snow is not sticking on the ground, but it is snowing on the 23rd of April. Gosh darn that, human-caused global warming. And as a matter of fact, I want to step back to the vaccine story here a little bit because I couldn't believe this story when I saw it. Okay, as you know, this year's flu vaccines have proven to be incredibly ineffective. And some of the vaccine makers are saying, well, we made the vaccine for the wrong strain of flu. We guessed wrong. But you should get it anyway just in case and give us the money. But over at AstraZeneca, makers of Flu Mist, which is also proven to be very ineffective against this year's flu, they have a different explanation. Human-caused global warming. Because of the unusually high temperatures along the supply chain caused by human-caused global warming, the flu mist just decayed and rotted away. It's somebody else's fault. We didn't mess up. It's that gosh darn human-caused global warming. I have this huge list I've collected over the years of all the things that are being blamed on human-caused global warming, things like increasing prostitution, the fall of the economy. It's absolutely, absolutely nonsense. Alrighty, let's see. The House has passed the cybersecurity bill despite privacy protests from pretty much everybody. And so they're out there reasserting their right to violate the Fourth Amendment against you, the law-abiding American citizens, on the theory that somehow they'll find the real criminals and terrorists who are out there developing their own systems of encryption. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has introduced his own bill that will reauthorize the entire Patriot Act until the year 2020, because the government cannot exist without watching you, the American people, constantly. Stealing pictures of your wives and daughters and sons naked so they can get their jollies late at night. Steal your business secrets so they can make money off of your work. And they've been caught doing that. Now, as you know, a lot of countries besides the United States of America have been maintaining this very generous immigration policy. And we're all feeling the effects. I think the reason for this open borders approach was to try and undermine our sense of a national identity, to make it easier for them to say there's no more border between Mexico and the United States or Canada. And they've been seeing exactly the same thing in the European Union. Well, the European Union is really beginning to feel the economic hardship from just allowing all of these immigrants into their country. And they're convening an emergency summit on migration tomorrow to basically say we have to control our borders if we're going to stand a chance of controlling our economy. We need the same thing here. Every nation has a right to decide who comes in and when and why. That's just common sense. No nation has a totally open border and says, yes, come on in here. Even at the heyday of American immigration in the 1930s, give us your tired, your sick, your poor, your oppressed, struggling for freedom. They still had to stop at Ellis Island for a medical check, and those that didn't pass the check were turned away. As opposed to now, when we have all these immigrants flooding all across America carrying scabies, H1N1, HIV, plague in one case, and who knows what all else. Tuberculosis. Yes, some of them have been found with tuberculosis. Tuberculosis had been eradicated in the United States. All of a sudden, it's a problem again. Gee, I wonder how it got back into the United States. Now, over at the Daily Mail, they've got a story. And by the way, it's becoming interesting that we have to learn about what's going on with our own country from the foreign press these days. But over at the Daily Mail, shocking images from cameras on Texas-Mexico border capture steady stream of illegal immigrants sneaking into the United States with packages of drugs and guns. And apparently, activists set up some of these wildlife infrared cameras along Texas' 1,200-mile border with Mexico. And they had 1,000 of these motion detection cameras, and the pictures are all coming back, just floods and floods of people coming in. Now, according to the U.S. Census Department, the illegal immigration accounts for 82% of the U.S. population growth over the last 8 years. And capping off this tragedy, we have this story about an individual who was brought into the country, was protected by Obama's immigration amnesty. The guy was a criminal in his own country. Came into the U.S., went on a murder spree, killed 4 people, including a former participant on the television series America's Next Top Model. And she was looking forward to a career as a fashion model. And she got murdered by this guy. One of the main reasons to have a secured border is to keep criminals from coming in here, from fleeing prosecution in their own country. And it's wide open. And we're getting not the best of these people in these other countries. We're getting the worst, the ones who couldn't make it there, the ones who committed crimes there, the ones who are sick, and they're coming up to the United States for free medical care, which you can't get. You're on Obamacare. But if you're an illegal immigrant, boy, do you get a sweet deal. All righty, getting on back to the police abuse here. I mentioned this earlier in the show. Ex-U.S. Navy SEAL Ben Smith was on Fox News, pardon me, and dropped a bombshell saying the U.S. government is trying to create a crisis, the illusion of an armed revolt, in order to declare a national emergency and impose martial law and drop what's left of the Bill of Rights in the shredder. The U.S. creates the enemies that they use to scare you into what they want you to do. And again, George Orwell warned us all about it in 1984. It's Emmanuel Goldstein. The Symbionese Liberation Army. It's a good classic example. Timothy McVeigh, Elohim City, all FBI creations. Now we have a former Officer of the Year, No Juarez, veteran Houston police officer, was Officer of the Year in 2009. 20-year veteran, has been arrested and indicted on charges of trafficking weapons and drugs for the drug cartels in his uniform, out of his car. He was supplying guns, bulletproof vests, cars, and police intelligence to members of the Los Zetas drug cartel. And, of course, we have the federal government supplying assault weapons, military weapons, full automatic weapons to the Sinaloa cartel. Whose side are they on? We're hearing more repercussions of that horrible situation that happened in Chicago. There was a single-car drunk driving accident. The driver has gone to jail because his passenger, a 20-year-old woman, died in the wreck. The police took her clothes off and took nude pictures of her. The mother is suing. The sheriff's department first denied such a thing had happened. Now they've turned around and saying that removing the clothing from dead women on the side of the road is a normal part of the standard operating procedure of documenting a crime scene. No, it isn't. First of all, the cops don't document the crime scene. The CSI, medical examiner, do. They're just out there having jollies. Oh, we got a naked woman we can take pictures of. It's amazing. We're hearing more and more abuses of civil forfeiture. Small cities, Pomona, California, a little farming town, took more than $14 million in the years 2006 through 2013. These police departments and their city governments are now dependent for their budget on stealing money from law-abiding citizens. The civil forfeiture laws were supposed to strip the wealth from drug criminals, but they're not going to go after the drug criminals. Those guys will come over to our homes and kill our families, so we're going to go after Joe citizens, and we're going to take their home because we found a marijuana seed in it. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get some animation work done, pay some bills on this place. We will be back tomorrow. Please make a point of sharing information about Genesis Communication and whatreallyhappened.com on all your social media. We're building our audience. We're starting to get new on-air affiliates. In fact, you might want to call your local talk radio show and suggest they carry programming from GCN, especially mine. I'll admit it, I'm biased. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.